Good morning, how are you today? My name is Dan, and in this video we will be working on a 2016 Land Rover LR4. We will be replacing the air compressor for the air suspension system. I will show you all the tools and all the torques and all the little bitty tricks and things we learn along the way so that you can do this project and do it correctly. And I can already tell you that the diagnosis for this thing is really strange. We're finding things that really should never ever happen. So hang on, here we go. Just a quick word about buying the parts. Be sure to understand what's in your truck before you buy your new parts. So the earlier trucks came with Hitachi pumps, and somewhere around 2012, 2013, they transitioned over to AMKs. Rover tells me that if you buy from them and you give them your VIN number, they will make sure you get the appropriate pump for your truck. But if you're buying at one of our other vendors, where of course it's a lot cheaper, you need to know what you've already got. So if you're changing like for like, Hitachi for Hitachi or AMK for AMK, that's cool, away you go. But if you're changing brands, you need to make sure that you get all the new mounting brackets, because the mounting brackets are different. And if you change brands, you need to get a new relay, and you need to reflash the software. And to reflash the software, you need the IID tool. So down at the bottom, there's a search for tool. And there we go. Now, near the bottom, it says ECU flash, and then suspension. And here is where we can reflash it to whichever compressor hardware is in there. And we can also identify what's in the truck. So let's see what's in here. Well, that's a surprise. Okay, so right now we are just doing a preliminary diagnostic. We just want to take a look at the pump. So to do that, just to get oriented, this is driver's side rear. When we do the actual pump, this wheel needs to come off. But to take a look at what's down there, we can do this real quick. Here's the case, and you cannot see it. Up there near that sticker, there's a bolt. Down here in the middle, shooting straight up, there's a bolt. And then around the back, you can see it right there. There's another bolt. And then there's these little clips. There's 5 or 6 of those clips around as we go. And let's just pop that off and see what's under here. Now it's interesting, I just showed you that the software comes up as Hitachi. And what do you think that says? That is most interesting. Let's go take a look and see what relay is up front. Okay, so we've taken the cover off the battery and the fuse boxes. Here's our fuse box diagram. And you can see right there where it says R7, that's going to be the relay. And come up here, and right there where that relay is missing, that's our relay. Here it is in my hand. And this is the orientation that goes back in. This is the correct relay for the AMK compressor as near as I can determine. It's a 70 amp. There we go, 70 amp relay. So that leaves us with the conclusion that either the software in the tool is incorrect or the software in the truck is incorrect. So now we move on and we talk to the folks who made the tool and see what they have to say. Okay, so we just learned that the truck believes it has a Hitachi compressor in it, and we know that's not true because we can take a look and see that it's an AMK. That's a real surprise, and I really can't figure out how that happened, and neither can anybody else. So I was very hopeful that running the correct software with the correct pump would solve our problems, but unfortunately it has not. So the new pump is on order. It should be here today. So tomorrow we will do the pump. Well, good morning. How are you today? So we are ready to start, and the vehicle has been jacked up and the wheel removed, and we are ready to go. I'm assuming you know how to jack up a Rover, but in case you don't, you put it down into access height and then lock it down. And then, of course, we are inside, so we can use the floor jack. And I have 2 jack stands underneath it today. Okay, our first step is to depressurize the entire system so we can open those airlines. I have not done this before, so let's give it a try. Okay, up here in the main menu on the top right, it says More. It beeps a suspension fault. And we're going to do service test, suspension, deflate. Yes. Okay, looks good. You can see where that relay is missing. Take out the relay. Let's take off the case. And there again, there's 3 bolts. This is the one on the front. Here's the one underneath. And we've already seen the one in the back. These are all 10 millimeters and 9 Newton meters. 10 millimeters, 9 Newton meters. This is the only torque spec for this project that I can find in the owner's manual. Okay, so here we are underneath. There's the compressor. We have 2 electrical connectors, and these are not too bad. We push in right here on this one, and on this one here, we push in right there. Well, let's take a look at the physical connections here on the pump. So there are 3 airlines that connect. There's one here. This is 14 millimeters. There's the one there. That's 12 millimeters. And then there's this one here. And that's just a slide fit. And the way these come apart is you push in on this black ring, push in on that, at the same time you pull the hose out. And then that pops out. And that's not too bad. And I'm going to be very careful with making sure we don't get any dirt in our lines. Then for the bolts, there's 3 bolts that hold the bracket to the frame. These 2 down here are easy enough to get at with a socket on an extension. And these are 10 millimeters. This one here, though, is proving to be very difficult to get at because we have the top cover sitting in here and it's tight. So I think I'm going to need to go to the hardware store to be able to reinstall this. I'm going to get a 10 millimeter with a built-in ratchet head, and hopefully that will do the trick. Okay, the airlines come off very easily, and I don't want anything in my airlines, so those are covered up with some plastic and some zippy ties. So here we are attempting to take the bracket off, and it's not too bad. Those 2 bottom ones that you can see, I can get at from the front, or from the outside with a socket. No, it's not a big deal. But that top one, there's no space to get in there. Even with a little bitty socket, you're not going to get on that. I just can't get in there. It takes a 10 millimeter. I can get a 10 millimeter box wrench on there. Well, it's time to reinstall the relay, and this is most interesting. This is the relay that our vendor gave us, and it does not physically fit. So you can see right there that little extra bit of plastic on the side interferes with the case. And I suppose you could cut that off, but I don't feel like it. So I'm just going to go ahead and reinstall the original one. Okay, so everything is reinstalled, everything's buttoned up, the wheel is reinstalled. These are 140, 140 Newton meters. And you'll notice I have taken this off before I installed the wheel. We'll talk about that later. And the clearance, it's hard to see, but I think the clearance is about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches at most. Up there. Remember, the system is fully depressurized, so it's lower than access height. And down here, here's our new cover, and there's our floor jack. And again, that's 1.5 inches, probably, maybe 2 inches of clearance there. Okay, well, I really hope that our diagnosis was correct and that everything fires up. So here we are back in the vehicle, and I see the keys over there, so we're good to go. So let's find out. Okay, it says air suspension not in customer mode. Don't know what that means. Don't quite know how to clear that. Well, let's figure it out. Okay, well, let's kind of mess around with this and see if we can figure out how we get this back to normal. Oops, needs to be running. Okay, so service test, suspension, re-enable, I think yes, enable, confirm required suspension height, push up or down to continue to reactivate. So that's our controls over here. Okay, so let's just take a look at the inlet air filter for our compressor. And it lives back here on the driver's side in the back. The access panel is off, and the video is going to be bumpy because it's really hard to get the phone back in there to take a look at it. And you might need to replace that filter if and when it gets dirty. And as you can see here, this is very, very clean. And if and when the foam that makes up the filter starts to disintegrate and degrade. Well, there's some other foam doing another job back here, and it looks just fine. So I'm going to assume that our filter is fine. So I'm going to try and show you where that is now. So it's here, this is outer wall. And then you turn towards the back, and you go up. And it's way back up in there. I'm going to try and snake the phone in and see if we can give you a look. And it's a bumpy ride, and it's hard to get this so you can see anything. So there's the tube, that black tube. And if I get the phone in a little bit more, you can see up there, there's a black bit up at the top of the tube. That's the air filter. And you can get your hand back in there, and you can get at it. So, but it's pretty hidden. So that's where it is. Okay, so now let's do a first level check of our height sensors. Get it started. Okay, so we're at the home menu, and now we want to go to the right. come over here where it says 4x4. And we can take a look. And you see these 4 white bars up there above the wheels. And they look like they're reflective of reality. So if you have a bad height sensor, a noisy one, those will be bouncing around and moving around a lot. Or if you're looking at the vehicle and the vehicle is level and one of those height sensors is not where it needs to be, say it's way down on the tire or way up, showing you something that's not in reflection of reality, then you know you have a bad height sensor. You can also use your tool and you can go in and measure the voltages at each of those sensors, but that's a whole nother level of diagnostics and we're not going to go into that here. So let's talk about our measurement device. So as you can see, this is a flexible tape measure. This comes out of the sewing kit and it is calibrated in metric units. And depending on what we're doing, we're measuring from the bottom of the fender well to the center of the hub, or from the bottom of the fender well all the way down to the ground, depending if we're doing a height calibration or a leak check. So if you're doing the height calibration, you can of course use the Land Rover tool, and the part number is over there in the margin, and that Land Rover tool is 273 Great British pounds. I think it's a lot easier just to borrow this from the sewing kit. Well, good afternoon. How are you today? So our next step is to pressure check the entire system to make sure we don't have any leaks. So get in it, start it up, and raise it up to off-road height. Then you may or may not have auto access as a feature, or may or may not have it turned on. And we do not want it to lower down, so leave the door open. Remember, when the doors are open, it cannot raise and lower. So leave the door open and then turn it off, of course. Then with all that done, come on over here to the fuses. Now what we had been pulling before is up here. It's a relay for the pump. What we want to do is disable the entire system, and that's a fuse. That's the third one up right there, the one that's missing. And that is because these wake up 2 hours after they're shut off and every 6 hours after that to make height adjustments, and we do not want that to happen. So now that the fuse is out, you can go ahead and close the door if you want, and go around and measure the height on all 4 wheels. You know the spot between the fender and, in this case, just the ground. Write down your numbers. Leave it sit overnight and then come back in the morning and measure those heights again. And if everything is good as it is here, all your heights will match and you do not have a leak. And on we go. Well, good morning. How are you today? So our next step is to calibrate the ride height. And to do that, we need to get the truck level and flat. I'm filming this in a suburban garage in Houston, Texas, and I'm assuming if you're doing it in a suburban garage, yours is much the same. And we know that those are not flat, they're pitched from inside to outside. They go downwards as we go outside. So I have measured this up, and I've determined that across the wheelbase of this truck, it is a 1-inch drop from front to back. And we have the vehicle up on a leveling block, a 1-inch leveling block. So now it is flat and level. So the next step is to set the suspension to tight tolerance mode. In normal mode, which is what we use every day, the suspension can be as much as a centimeter away from its set point on any particular corner, and will not be adjusted until it exceeds a centimeter. In tight tolerance mode, that's set to 3 millimeters. So we want to set the tight tolerance mode before we do the calibration. So let's get it started. Search. And we want to do service test. Suspension. Set tight tolerance. Yes. back. And now we can do calibration, suspension. And I'll step away here for a second because I need to show you something in the manual. So the next step is to understand our measurements, and I want to show you this, and then you can decide what you want to do. So here we have a plumb bob hanging down. I'm on the back end. Nice metric plumb bob because it's a metric wrench, right? So this distance here between the center of the hub and our plumb bob is 53 millimeters, and I'll show you why that's important. Okay, so here we are looking at the mechanics manual, and in this section of the manual they are discussing the front suspension, and it says to set the height from the center of the hub to the edge of the fender trim to 466 millimeters. Sounds straightforward enough, but remember that 53 millimeters, right? And here is the drawing that goes with that, and that's pretty clear too, but this is saying something different. This is measuring between those two parallel lines at 466 millimeters. So there's our 466, and remember our 53, and you do the math, remember a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that works out to 469 millimeters. You know, 3 millimeters, is that important? Yeah, it's up to you. So now let's pop back up here to the manual, and again it says, now we're in the section talking about the back end. It says set the height between the hub and the edge of the fender trim to 485 millimeters. And again, the drawing shows between the two parallel lines, 485. And I've measured this one up, and again, that's 53 millimeters is the offset. So again, this is the rear, 485, 53, and a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you get 488. So again, 3 millimeters different. Important? I don't know, but I'm going to use the 488 and the 469. We need to measure from the center of the hub to the bottom of the wheel well. So we need to know exactly where the center is on this. And I have measured this up multiple times, and I always get the same answer. So you take this side of the V, here's the V, the outside side on the left, that line, and then the top of the bottom line of text. Where those two lines intersect is the exact center on that. And let's see. And we're not going to count the little flare on the edge of the V. So again, this line here and this line, oh, there it is, this line here. Okay, so let's go ahead and work our way around the vehicle. We're doing calibration on the suspension. And we do this. This has verbiage in here that I'm just going to blow through really quick. Okay, so it wants us to be at the front driver's side. Okay, and these numbers don't really mean anything. They're just numbers from the software. So we just measure on that spot in the center of the hub. It's right there. The magic number is 469. And you know it's a 470. Next. There we go. Now go over to the passenger side rather. So if you go up just a touch, ooh, way too much. $470. Next. Passenger rear, remember this was supposed to be 488. 490, it's supposed to be 488. Close enough? This one is high. 490. And that's how long it takes to do the entire vehicle, really quick. Now, me being me, I'm going to go around and do it again and double check. And that's it. Okay, so now let's not forget that we are still in tight tolerance mode, and that is not a user mode. So we need to disconnect from tight tolerance mode. It needs to be running. Once again, it's under service test. Suspension. Set normal tolerance. Yes. Okay, so it has been a couple of weeks and a couple hundred miles, and everything is looking really good. So I'm going to go ahead and declare this project complete. So obviously, that's a lot of information for 3 bolts and 3 air connections. You can make that project as involved or as simple as you would like. Obviously, if you have the tool, you can do a lot of nice diagnostics and nice system checks. If you don't have the tool, just really be careful when you depressurize the system, because there's a lot of pressure in there and you need to be safe. But I hope you find it useful, and good luck when you attempt this project. Have a great day.